Hi, just before we hop into this episode, just want to give you a little bit of a heads up, touch on a few sensitive subjects. Probably a good idea to make sure the kids aren't in the room on this. Hi, and welcome to Road to Revenue. I'm your host, Lee, and this is the podcast where we go into the creator story, talking about the twists, the turns, the bumps in the road on every creator's road to revenue. Joining us today, welcome, Jordan Harbinger. Great to have you here.
Thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate you letting me do this in my pajamas. But that's the beauty of podcasting, right? You can show up. You don't even need... It's like before everybody was working from home and using Zoom or whatever, you couldn't go to work without pants on. And now podcasting and everybody else's job now share that trait that you can show up with no pants on. And I appreciate you giving me the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely happy. And we appreciate you wearing the GeniusLink pajamas that we sent you.
Yeah. For those of you watching on YouTube, I am definitely wearing GeniusLink pajamas.
You've got a rich history, a lot of experience, and with your podcast, you've taken from absolute zero to this huge height. There's got to be a lot of interesting nuggets that you've come across. So I guess really to start off with a little bit is, what was important when you took that leap, becoming the Jordan Harbinger Show?
It's funny because a lot of my friends who are successful entrepreneurs, they were the kids who, when they grew up, they were like, oh, I'm going to go into tech. I'm going to be rich. I'm going to do this, that, and make all this money. And I actually never cared about any of that. Unfortunately / fortunately, I came into this with no real revenue plan and no idea about how to monetize everything. I actually came into podcasting from the idea that I thought it would be pretty cool to make maybe half as much as I was going to make as an attorney doing something that I actually liked, which was radio and podcasting. And so I would have been fine with just getting a job at Sirius XM satellite radio, where I ended up starting. I did my podcast there. And I was like, this is great. I mean, I'm already kind of there. And scaling, and then when podcast advertising became a thing and people started to pay for impressions on the show and, selling programs and stuff on the show, it just started to really open my eyes to the idea that like this could be a very successful business. Initially, I was doing a show. I was talking about dating and relationships because that's what I was interested in, because I was 26 years old, whatever. And I was really into like reading body language and all that stuff that I think now is really popular. And back then we didn't know that most of it was just pseudoscience nonsense, but whatever. And I was young and I was really enjoying the process. And then one day somebody said, I want you to consult for my sales team. And I was like, oh, I'm not a professional consultant, so I can't do this. And this guy who owned a mortgage bank in California, I was living in Michigan at the time, was like, you don't realize that you are a professional, and that most people who call themselves professionals literally woke up one morning and they were like, I could do this, and started charging people money for their consulting, and they are largely less qualified than you. And I was like, really? I'm 27. I'm an attorney. Like, am I really qualified to teach your sales team? And he goes, let me put it this way. I've been taking the free stuff you've been talking about in your podcast, teaching that to my sales team. They apply it. We make more money. And all I'm doing is listening to your stinking podcast that you're doing from some dude's basement in Michigan. So yeah, you're qualified to teach this stuff. You're already teaching it. You're just not getting paid. And I was like, okay, fine. So I started charging for consulting and phone coaching. I didn't think of the products. The clients thought of the products. Maybe that's common knowledge these days, but back then it was like, oh, letting the users drive the product? That's a novel idea. Bear in mind, this is 2006, 2007. There is no tech sector to speak of that I knew about at the time, certainly not in Michigan. And I didn't have masterminds with people founding Twitter or whatever to go off of. Like, that was not a thing. So after a few short months of doing phone coaching and consulting, people were like, I need to come and see this stuff in action. I need you to show it to me. And I said, well, we don't have live events. Well, you should make one. I'll fly to you. Where do you live? New York. Okay, I'm going to come over for a weekend. So a guy came over for a weekend. We charged him a few $1,000s. He was like, this is life-changing. So I talked about that on the podcast. And people were like, oh, I didn't know we could just come over to your house. Where do I sign up for that? And I was like, wait, I don't know if I want this. Right. But that started our live-in training programs that we don't run those anymore, but, because I'm an adult now and I don't want strangers living in my house for a week at a time. But we started running programs that were like a week, and guys would come in and we had bunk beds, and our landlords hated us, of course, because we were breaking the law probably in New York. And that was really the path where it was kind of like, oh, we're going to do this thing we like. People are then going to tell us things that they want from us. We're going to say, okay, but it's expensive. They're going to say, great, we don't care. And then I'm just going to start collecting the money. And it took me literally years to figure out that I should like maybe be marketing this thing, and maybe I should figure out how to price things, and maybe I'm underpricing things, and maybe I should have a sales team that sells it instead of just waiting for people to cold email me and ask for this, you know? And so I didn't know, basically I didn't know anything about what I was doing at all. And I sort of fumbled back asswards, Forrest Gump style, into a successful business in many ways. Now it's run like a business, but there were years where we finally hired an accountant a few years in, and he's like, let me see your books. And we're like, oh, we didn't write any books. And he's like, no, your accounting books. And we were like, oh, is that like credit card statements? And he's like, oh God, we're going to jail. Like, we gotta fix this now. I was like, yeah, I don't know. We need to, probably we should pay taxes at some point. And he's like, you haven't been paying taxes? I'm like, well, income tax. He's like, you guys are in trouble. Like, I need to call my entire team in here and open up the files. I mean, it was bad. We were kids, man. Like, we were young. There weren't YouTube didn't exist. There weren't people teaching you how to do this stuff. You know, you had to learn it in business school.
There is a theme there, though, isn't there? Because I mean, when you were younger than 26, like when you're a teenager, again, I think it was your curiosity really that drove you into actually people turning around and going, well, maybe you could do a thing for us, whether it be the websites or the FBI and the messaging platforms on AOL. Is it a curiosity that drives it? Is that what pushes it?
It is. When I was younger, I got a computer. I had no idea about the internet. It came with a modem. I was like, this is life-changing. I had a neighbor who was really into computers, and his mom was into computers. And this is like 1989, and they had Russians over from the Soviet Union. And I don't even know how that guy got a visa to even come here, but he was into computers too. And he would show us how to access things. And we would dial into the library of some university, you know, and get into that was called Gopher. It was before Google existed. And we would be running around looking for knowledge and books. And the books weren't scanned online or anything, but there was like chat clients you could use. So I'd go in there and it would be like, oh, I'm in a channel about pirating software, and the other people in the channel are from places where I thought, I've heard of this, but only in passing, right? Europe, Israel. What the heck is this? People would be speaking other languages, and I go, oh, I think there's something wrong with my chat client because it's not, the characters aren't showing. No, it's Hebrew, you moron. I was like, oh, what's Hebrew? I mean, it was really mind expanding for a kid my age at that time. Yeah. And then also, for the wrong reasons, right? Because I was like, oh, I'm stealing software. This is funny. I'm learning how phone systems work. Pre-internet, you could call a local number. People from your local area would be talking about things, trading software, whatever it is. It was basically like a tiny message board internet. My villain origin story would be that one day I found this bulletin board. I called every bulletin board. I always wanted to see what they were all about. And it was local, or so I thought, right? It was in my area code. And I dialed it and I would chat with people, and I dialed it and I would chat with people. And there was people on there that I liked, and we'd play these card games or whatever they were online. I'd be on there for hours. I'd be kind of like doing my homework, and I'd be like checking with the chat thing, just monopolizing the phone line. And then one day, probably about a month later, my dad comes in, like kick the door in mad, right? And he's like, this is your stinking phone bill. And it was $250. It was actually like $242. I remember it very specifically because it was like a life-ruining amount of money for me. And I had unfortunately, been saving my money for like 18 months to buy a radio-controlled car. And I had like $260, which is basically what I needed to get this dope RC car. And I now it was gone. And what had happened was, I'm pretty sure this is illegal now in the United States. The phone company decided that that phone number was a long distance call, even though you didn't need to dial the area code because it was technically in my area code. So they just decided that some numbers were long distance. And if you dialed that, well, screw you. Oh, well, here's your bill. But I'd been staying on for hours each day. Then I decided the phone company really screwed me on this one. Like, this is not really my fault. I had no way of knowing. You can't call and ask how much this phone call is. They don't even tell you. So I was like, I'm going to get them back. I started learning everything I could about the phone system. I definitely did a lot of illegal stuff with the phones as a kid. I figured out how to bill payphones for calls that I was making on other phones. You had to have the payphone's phone number to do that. Often it was right on the payphone. They sent somebody around my area, removed all those numbers from all the payphones. Doesn't help because I just dialed another number that tells you what the number is you're calling from. And then they disabled that number. When you put in a quarter or whatever into a payphone in America, it would make a certain sound. Hallmark had released these greeting cards where you could say like, "Hi, Grandma, happy birthday." And then it would record on this digital chip. And it was like, 5 seconds of recording time. It was like $11. I bought that. I recorded it. Now it's a digitally perfect recording of that quarter tone. And now I can tell the payphone that I am putting in $15 in quarters when I have put in no money. And I started calling Japan and asking people questions from payphones for hours every day. I cost them thousands of dollars in charges, but that wasn't enough. I still wasn't done. Right now I was really into it. They went around and they made it so that you couldn't play anything into the speaker, or sorry, into the microphone of the payphone without putting in a coin first. So then I would put in a nickel, it would open up the microphone, and then I would play $15 in quarter. So I just kept staying one chess move ahead of these engineers at the phone company, and I literally cost them tens of thousands of dollars. And at the time, that was so satisfying because I was getting back at these people who had screwed me over. I was learning about something very esoteric, and I was able to use it to communicate with people, which was like this sweet spot. Looking at the Jordan Harbinger Show and the topics I talk about now, communication, esoteric thought, like, right, this is all like the sweet spot, the nexus of where all my interests converge. Of course, now I realize they just passed all those costs onto the consumer, and the house always wins. But at the time, I was like, yeah, suckers, teach you to bill people for a local zone call. But to answer your question, yeah, it's really all my interests are always driven by, obviously, by my curiosity, but my curiosity always has led me down these rabbit holes of like, let me learn everything I can about this system and then break the system. And I did that in law school. I did that in so many other ways, even with the bar exam. But I've always kind of had that hacker mentality. And people think hacker is somebody who makes a program in the computer. A hacker is really anybody who figures out a system so well that they can break the rules. And that's always been something that I have been interested in and naturally inclined towards.
You can argue that there's some elements of things that you shouldn't have done, but no great shakes really.
Right.
But what's been your North Star to keep you on the side of good? Because you quite easily could have gone the other way.
Man, tell me about it. My parents definitely, there were points at which my parents were pretty convinced I was going to end up in deep trouble. Like I had an incident where I used a credit card generator to generate a credit card number to order pizza for my entire school. And that was all fun and games until they were like, this is a federal crime. Like this is credit card fraud. The police were like, the FBI is going to come down on you. And luckily the FBI was like, wait, you created a credit card generator that created a credit card number. You used it to order pizza for your school. And they're like, I would say you're a dumbass, but this is actually really clever. What you need to do is not get in trouble. And you need to take this skill that you have and just aim it towards literally anything else. And you're going to be very successful. And I remember that FBI agent was like, I would hire you if you weren't 13 and also being a dumbass. And I was like, that's pretty cool. Like, here's this FBI agent who could just be telling me I'm a piece of crap, but instead was like, you have enough talent or skill or whatever to do something really good if you don't screw up your opportunity. Because I thought, oh, I'm just like some punk. I'm not great at school. I'm not going anywhere. I'm just going to screw around. And he was like, no, you just have the cannon aimed in the wrong direction. And that was a life-changing thing for me. I was on AOL chat rooms a lot as well because I was young and I got AOL and I thought, okay, like I'll be on the IRC with the hackers and I'll be on AOL trying to meet chicks, local to me, and with very mixed results, let's say. But also, what I noticed that was weird was there would be these guys in there that would be like, hey, how old is everyone? And people would be like 14, 13, and then they would never answer, or they would say something like, yeah, I'm 14 too. And then like 5 hours later, after they forgot they lied about their age, they'd be like, oh, I gotta go. It's time for me to make dinner for my wife. And I'm like, what? And I was like, wait, what's going on here? So anyway, I'm starting to meet girls on AOL, America Online chat rooms. And I was also making a website for this security company. And the security company they were doing like bodyguarding and stuff. And they worked for, in part, Mike Ilitch, the owner of the Detroit Red Wings and Little Caesars Pizza, which in the United States is like these are massive hockey team, massive pizza chain that's international. That guy's a billionaire. And so these guys were like no joke security, like ex-special forces guys. Some of them were punks, whatever, like me, but nobody was a kid. I was the only kid. And I remember they were talking about dating one day. And they're like, how do you meet girls? And I was like, oh, on the internet. You guys got to check this out. I'm on these chat rooms. And they're like, internet, man, you got to go to the club and da-da-da. Like, this is in Detroit, right? So I'm like the only white guy, and I'm the only guy who's underage. So I'm learning adult stuff, like for better or for worse. And they're like, how are you meeting girls on there? And so I'm telling them, and they're like, here's a trick. This is what I learned in Air Force intelligence. He's like, what you should do is make a profile that's a girl, and then you'll see what all the guys are saying to you, and then you can reverse engineer what works and like how to be different and interesting. And I was like, my head exploded. I was like, this is genius. So I make a profile that's a girl. It's like bikini sun some number, right? Just obviously a girl. Well, what happened was I got a bunch of messages from guys, usually hi, but then I got a bunch of messages from guys that were like 38 years old. And I was like, oh, that's weird. This is a teenage girl, clearly by the profile. And they were like, yeah, it's okay. Insert creepy phrase here about why age is only a number, right? And I remember going back to work to the security company and being like, yeah, look at this loser. He's telling me like I got these guys in there that are like 40. They're telling me this, and my boss is like, wait, what? I'm like, yeah, isn't that funny? And he's like, no, this is not funny. This guy is a predator. You don't understand. This is bad. And I was like, oh God. So he's like, print out the chat transcripts and bring them in. So I would chat with these guys as a 15-year-old girl. Nothing gross, just like really incriminating for them. Print it out, brought it to my boss. He brought it to a contact at the FBI who was like, how are you getting these? I'm like, chats online. And his name is Agent Forrester. And he was like, how often does this happen? I'm like, any day I could have 100 of these. And he really blew a gasket, and he called Washington, D.C., and they were like, we got to arrest some of these guys. In order to get these guys to do something where the FBI would have a real sort of hook to sink into this, is if they went from Michigan to Ohio, which is only a couple of miles away. And so I would I would say, oh, my family's going on a vacation to Ohio. And they would say, oh, I can come meet you at your hotel while you're alone, or I can come pick you up or whatever when your family's gone. So we would send him to this Holiday Inn in Toledo, Ohio. And as far as I'm aware, local police and the FBI were there to pick him up. And the problem is there's an seemingly unlimited number of people doing that. Like, whereas I remember doing it twice and then handing the whole thing over to the FBI because it was easy enough for them to do this themselves. I could have done it twice before lunch on any given day, and we would have barely made a dent in what I assume at that time, when barely anyone had the internet at all, was the sheer amount of internet predators that were out there. And once I started getting these guys popped by the cops, and I got all these sort of accolades from like my local community and my boss and the FBI, I was like, being good is so much more rewarding than being bad. It's so much more fun because you do the same sort of dark net stuff, but at the end, everybody pats you on the back, and you can look yourself in the mirror and be like, I'm a good person. when you steal something from somebody, even if it's the phone company and they frickin' deserve every cent they lose, you still feel like a piece of crap because you're still ruining someone's day. And at the end of the day, some engineer had to work overtime and miss dinner with his kids to fix my shenanigans, right? So it doesn't feel good for more than a few seconds or a few minutes. When you do something good, you remember it for like, what am I, 43, 25 years.
And so is that what really goes into, because so right now with online, right, we have an opportunity with marketing to be incredibly clever with funnels and and triggers and sales pages and to really use every single tool at our disposal and actually build some really compelling sales journeys.
Yeah.
So do you think that really positive feedback around being good, doing good, being able to stand up in public and go, yeah, you know what, this is exactly what I do, this is how I do it. Do you think that informs your approach to how you market
Definitely.
the podcast?
It definitely does, and it's my approach to marketing anything, even when I sold training and consulting. Because what I noticed back when I was doing the dating stuff, there was this whole community called the pickup artist community. I don't know if you're familiar with this at all, but it was creepy and it was awkward. And what I realized was a lot of it was sales letters that were 18 pages long, and later they changed it to sales videos once you could put video online reliably, and they were like 20 minutes long, and you couldn't skip ahead, and you couldn't fast forward, and you had to wait to the end to get the buy button or whatever. And I was like, oh, this stuff's really compelling. These guys are making a lot of money. But what I noticed was none of them were using their real names. And I remember thinking, why are you doing that? Why do you have to remain anonymous? Oh, well, the subject matter. I'm thinking, but if the subject matter is to help people, then what's the problem putting your name and your face on it? So I've always just been Jordan Harbinger. I don't have a fake. When I was doing the phone company stuff, I had a fake name, obviously. But, when I was doing marketing and stuff and as an adult, I never used a fake name. I don't understand why you need to have a fake name and be anonymous. The only reason I can think of to be anonymous when you're selling something is because you don't want to pay the consequences of selling something that you don't really believe in or you don't like or that's unethical. Doesn't mean you have to post your income like some of those guys do on the website. I think that might be a little dangerous. I don't post photos of my kids, whatever. But to put your name on something is like the kind of first rung on the ladder of accountability. And I noticed that those guys would never do that. And part of the reason was they relied on people buying something that they got sort of hooked into and then just refusing to give those people a refund. Or, forced continuity when that became a thing where it was like, you have to buy this, it's $20 a month, and we're going to make it impossible to cancel. That stuff that people are getting sued by the FTC now for. So I never wanted to do any of that stuff just because I thought the golden rule is the golden rule for a reason. You treat others how you want to be treated. And I met a lot of those guys and all of them were miserable. All these rich scammers were all miserable. And I didn't want to be like that. And I don't know if they're miserable because they scam people or they scam people because they're miserable. But certainly that's a vicious cycle in some way.
So now how do you choose? How do you select where so you've got obviously lots of opportunities, right? People come to you. How many downloads are you at now a month on the podcast?
Yeah, like millions. It fluctuates. I mean, it could be, 7, 10. Now it's like 4 because I'm only releasing here and there. I'm trying to have a life. You know how it goes. But yeah.
We do encourage it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So how do you, when obviously you get approached probably daily, multiple times a day, how do you decide who you're going to partner with, who you're going to actually bring into the Jordan Harbinger Show world?
I would say at this stage of the game for me, it's about warm introductions, right? It has to be somebody that knows me that is introducing me to somebody and vouching for me, unless the person has done a lot of homework. And so barring warm intros, which I always recommend, I think having a good network is really good. I do realize not every vendor has a great network and can get a warm intro, but a good pitch that I got recently was, hey, Jordan, I looked at your website and I found some areas where I think you can improve. I see that every day. But then the guy said, I work with these people, and these people. I know that they know you. they're really satisfied, you can reach out to them and ask, and they will tell you that. And that's important because a lot of people will say, oh, I work with these people. And then I forward it to those people and they're like, I've never heard of this person in my life. So that bluff blows up in your face and you get immediately blocked by me. But this guy was like, you can ask these people. So I asked him and they said, yeah, I work with that guy. He's good. That's huge. That's almost as good as a warm introduction in the first place. Then the guy's like, can we get on a call? We can keep it really short. I'm going to go over your website and show you what I think can be improved. So I do the call. I go over the website with him. He shows me what he thinks can be improved. He doesn't say, I bet I can do better than this. He shows me sort of like wireframes of what he would put here. Hey, this squeeze, I would change the copy because of this. Hey, this thing, it actually goes below the fold. There's a plugin I can install that makes it stay right at eye level no matter where they're reading on the page. I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. Right. So he tells me and shows me this stuff on a Zoom call. And I'm like, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about. And he goes, I can put this into place and I'll do it at cost just so you see how well it works. And I will do analytics before and I'll do analytics after that show you that the conversion increased. And he's like, and if you don't like it, I will undo all of it and put it back the way that it was. And I thought, that's really compelling, right? Because you got a guy who's going to do it at cost. I don't expect him to lose money on this, but he's not trying to make bank on the first deal. He's also not going to change it and then bounce and I'm never going to see him again. He's going to show me a before and after comparison. And if I don't like the comparison, he's going to undo the damage that he did in the first place. Now, I don't expect a refund from it or anything, but like, that's a pretty good deal, right? That's a pretty good deal. The only thing that would make it more compelling is money back. But I also understand that people have to pay people to do things, and like offering a refund for work you did that somebody just decided they didn't like, even though it worked, is not fair. So, I'm willing to take a little bit of a risk there. We're not talking about a huge amount of money either. Talking about a couple grand for a website overhaul, not a big deal. So that kind of thing is really helpful. You have to have it. I think my friend Ramit calls it like the briefcase technique, where you show up and you basically make it so the person you're talking to can't afford not to hire you because you really know what you are doing and what you are talking about. And that kind of thing is pretty compelling and a great way to get your foot in the door and do some good work. And for anybody that really wants to do work with me long-term at a larger scale, it's always drip by drip. I'm always very wary of somebody who reaches out and is like, I want to do a joint venture business with you. It's like, who are you again? And I see this a lot and I get it. People are really gung-ho and they're like, hey, if I get to work with this guy, like my brand is going to go through the roof. You really can't do that, right? You have to let people dip their toes in the water. And a lot of young gunners don't want to do that. They want everything overnight. That's not a good sign. It's a red flag. Somebody who's willing to work slowly and get in your good graces over a period of months or even years, that's a person who understands the level of trust that's required in a business like this.
You do double down on the networking, right? Because you've got your, what is it,
6-minute networking?
6-minute networking.
Yeah, 6-minute networking. Yeah. 6minute-networking.com. That stuff, I put that stuff up for free because I was like, this is massively helped my business. And I just taught it to a bunch of Navy SEALs yesterday night. It's just a really, really useful stuff.
How much are you still doing on that networking, and how much does that influence your opportunities to get presented to you?
Yeah, I'm constantly reaching out to people and keeping in touch with people, and I have people constantly reaching out to me to ask for things, that I know already, know, like, and trust. So I'm always sort of actively keeping in touch with people and making my network work for me. The reason it's 6-minute networking is it takes like 5 minutes a day, but 5-minute networking was taken. So so why not just do it slower and take an extra minute? So I do that stuff every single day. One of the drills, just to give your audience listeners a feel, is grab your phone, scroll to the bottom of your text message threads. Those are the people that you haven't talked to in a really long time. Skip the X's, right? Skip the boss that fired you for no good reason because you caught them stealing, right? Skip those folks. But all those people you haven't talked to in a really long time, reach out to 2, 3, 4 of them per day, just with a, hey, man, it's been a really long time. This is Jordan Harbinger. I'm not sure if you have my number saved. I know we went out to lunch 3 years ago at this conference in San Diego. If I recall correctly, you owned a bakery. How's that going? Are you still doing that? That kind of thing. And I might even send a picture of my kids if it's somebody who's like a personal connection, be like, this is what I'm dealing with every day, wiping and diping. And that compels a response, something like 60 to 70% of the time. and you reactivate those old weak and dormant ties in your network in a way that's not gross. You're not asking them for anything. You're literally just re-engaging them. That's it. And because you want to dig the well before you get thirsty, right? You want to build relationships before you need them. And the way you do that is you reconnect with people, you see what they're up to. Maybe you assess a need they have. Routinely, I reach out to somebody I haven't talked to in a while. I see what they're up to. I look at their website. I will be honest, a lot of the time I look at the website and it's garbage. And I say, hey, do you need a website guy? Because I got a great web team out of New Zealand. Happy to refer you. And I've referred at least 20 clients to the guys who made my website because they do it on time. They're reliable. They don't steal. And the final product is good. Like that's, a lot of people that's hard to find. So creating that referral business for my web guy has been great. And helping people get their business website off the ground by sending an email is also really great. It earns you social capital or referral currency or whatever you want to call it. And you just want to be known as the guy, the go-to guy who might know somebody who can help with X or ABC thing. That kind of stuff that's a good reputation to have, and it keeps you top of mind for a lot of people. And that's an example of the stuff that's in 6-minute networking. And I think giving that away for free helps me, right? Because if I create people who do really well with that, and then I need something and I reach out to them and their network is active and hot, they have that much more reach that they could use for me. So it actually helps. It's sort of a whole is greater than the sum of its parts type of thing when it comes to networking and relationships.
Is that your first go-to with tapping into your network to bring on new guests, or do you go further afield? What's your approach?
Yeah, I would say that's true. I definitely reach out to people that I know. Maybe I had a journalist on a couple years ago, and then I see that they did an interview with somebody, and I reach out to them and I go, hey, do you think that person you interviewed would do my show too? And they're like, oh yeah, well, let me see. Because I helped sell thousands of copies of their book, so they're pretty happy with me, right? So that kind of thing has been extremely helpful. Yeah, I would say booking guests, 50% are things that come in my inbox because somebody's got a new book, and the other 50% are me going, wow, this person's really interesting. Oh, LinkedIn. All right, they're connected with this person. Oh, they were in this industry. Let's see if this hostage negotiator I interviewed in the UK happens to know this other special forces guy in the UK. Oh, they do know each other. Cool. All right. Would you make that intro so I'm not just DMing a famous person on Instagram, which is the success rate is fairly low for that kind of thing, as you might imagine.
As I've experienced as well,
Right.
Full disclosure.
Yeah.
So in terms of the best advice revenue wise, then, I mean, you've had incredible guests on your podcast, right? On the show, you've had some of the biggest names. There's got to be some standout piece of advice that you just resonated with you that actually you go back to on a regular basis.
I would say early on in the game, and this is fresh in my mind because I just taught the 6-minute networking stuff to these Navy SEALs, and one of the guys asked me this question. He runs a hunting lodge, and he was like, how do I sell this? How do I market this? And he's like, my competitors, they put up like these web pages, and I guess people go to the web page and they book. But he's like, I don't know how to do that. And I said, well, you already have customers, right? He's like, yeah, we have kind of a loyal group of customers. And he's like, but how do I get them to bring their friends? And I said, how do you communicate with these people? He's like, when they're here, we talk, but that's pretty much it. And I said to him, hey, man, instead of he's thinking about like hiring a sales team and having them do outreach. And I thought, what you need is to grab the phone numbers of all of these people and or emails and write them an email from you personally that says, hey, usually you're here in November. We missed you this year. Did you go somewhere else? Are you thinking about coming in next year? Or are we still going to see you this hunting season? And he's like, and then just talk to them. And I'm like, yeah, just talk to them. This is something I learned early on. I can't remember from who, as a business owner. This is like, we're going on 10 years here. And this person told me to just treat your clients like actual humans. This is probably like Dan Pink, I think, if that name rings a bell. It might be from To Sell Is Human. And it was really just treating your clients like humans and texting them and talking with them. And I took that sales advice myself when I was running my training company. And the bulk of my sales were run off of Facebook Messenger back when anybody used Facebook back in like 2009. And I would just engage with people on there and they'd go, I love your show. And I go, great. What are your favorite episodes? How'd you find us? I can't believe I'm chatting with you. This is so cool. You're my favorite podcaster. Yeah. Hey, awesome. Have you ever thought about doing one of our live programs that you hear about on the show? Yeah. Well, I don't know. Like, yeah. Tell me the deal with those. Hey, give me your phone number and I'll call you. We'll set up a time to talk. And then I would call them. I would talk about the show. I would talk about things they're interested in, things about that they want to learn. And then I would say, and I would say, like, you can sign up. Here are the dates we have. And I remember being like, oh, man, it's really hard. I'm only closing like 70% of the people that I talk to on the phone, 80% maybe. So I hired a sales consultant and he was like, I'm going to sign up for your sales consulting class because I don't close anywhere near 70 to 80% of the people that I talk to on the phone. And I told him what I was doing and he's like, this is really pretty shockingly simple and good. He's like, I do phone sales of totally different. And I remember him helping me with some of my systems for free because I was just showing him what I was doing and he had never seen anybody just talk to sales leads like a actual person. And that was how I learned to do that probably from Dan Pink or Gary Vaynerchuk or one of those guys. Frankly, one of the best things that I've learned from them is that they're always empowered by the people around them. So it kind of does go back to the networking stuff. Like even talking with Kobe Bryant, he wasn't like, yeah, I'm so great at basketball. I'm so great at business. He was like, what I'm really good at is keeping my team operating it on all cylinders. And so he's like, I found the best creative designer for this book. I found the best illustrator for this book. I found the best book binding person that had all these really cool ideas for this book. I found the best cover designer for this book. I found the best animator for my short series, for which I think he won like an Oscar for that thing, right? And you think Kobe Bryant animated series Oscar winning, it's because he just expects excellence out of everybody. He recruits for excellence and then he empowers them to be excellent. And I'm thinking that's really cool. That has very little to do with your personal performance on the court or even in the business arena. It's really about leadership, and leadership is the Venn diagram of leadership and networking is almost a circle.
I mean, it is overused, but I think it needs to be said. It's being authentic, right? Like it's actually being real, being genuine, being you, and putting yourself out there. No, I think that's a great piece of advice. I am super curious because everyone's talking about it at the moment. You're currently using it on your website. AI, how are you leveraging it at the moment?
AI is great. It's hard to overstate how much this is going to change everything. And if people aren't playing with Chat GPT, I know it's like, oh God, not this crap again. It's like cryptocurrency, right? It's like, shut up about Bitcoin. This is different. AI is really going to replace, like right now you use it and you go, oh, it's pretty cool. But my wife, she uses it instead of Google for a lot of things. She'll say, explain how this works. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's a pretty good idea. You don't have to wait for a YouTuber to make a video about something. Chat GPT can explain it to you. And it can also then explain it to my 5-year-old son, almost 5-year-old son, in terms that he can understand. He can't read it, but we can read it to him and he starts to understand it a little bit, which is incredible. But I use it to surface ideas from the episodes, because if you say, hey, Jordan, have you ever talked about negotiating a raise? I go, yeah, it's probably in one of my 1,000 plus episodes. I don't know where. And they go, okay, well, never mind. But if you ask the AI chatbot that has all the transcripts ingested into it, it says, here are the 15 episodes where you talked about negotiating a raise. But so that you don't have to listen specifically, here are the bullet points. And if you want to hear the conversation about it, you just click here. And it'll then go to the timestamp in the episode where that conversation is happening, and people can listen to the clip with the answer in it, which is that's really incredible. And pretty soon, you won't need a podcast-specific AI bot like we have. We have Dexa, which is this new startup that runs it.
Have you actually seen it increase your listeners? Like, is it actually bringing people, or is it increasing the amount people are consuming on the podcast?
Not that I can tell, because right now someone has to go to the website, jordanharbinger.com/AI, query something, and then push play on an episode. But I see people using it by the hundreds, but usually they go, what's the mattress Jordan talked about in the commercial and what's the code? That's very useful, right? Because for podcasters, they'll say, what's the title of the book with the hostage negotiator? And it'll say, Here's the book. Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference. Here's the link, genius.us/whatever code. And then there's a Genius link in there. And then people can click it and they go, oh, I'll just buy this through here, right? As opposed to Googling hostage negotiator. They find the guy's name. They go into Google. They Google it. They go on Amazon. Amazon gets the sale. I get jack squat. Right.
Yeah.
So it makes it really easy for people to use promo codes rather than like, let me rewind and try and find this 60-second commercial in this hour-long podcast, which is not going to happen.
Yeah, I have been guilty of doing that. Absolutely trying to pause, stop, go back. Absolutely futile.
Yeah, and you give up, and then you're like, screw it. Jordan's already got money. He's not going to get credit for the sale. But the problem is what happens when you lose 60% of your sales. Agency might assume some sales are lost, but they might also just not renew, right? So I know that we overperform for a lot of advertisers because I also say, by the way, if you don't have your own AI chatbot, going back to our sales is human thing, one of the things I say on my show is, if you can't remember the name of a sponsor or you need a code and you can't figure it out, just email me and I'll surface it for you. And I get people who are like, hey, what is that mattress thing that cools the bed down? I can't remember what it was called. I want to buy one of those. So I email them the code and they buy it, and that sponsor just gets another conversion. So if that happens like a few dozen times a year, which is not a lot, I am now going from the top 10 percentile of whatever conversions that sponsor has to maybe the top 5. That means they're going to buy the whole year. So that directly translates me sending a dozen or 2 emails a year extra after searching for a code on my website that somebody couldn't find could translate into hundreds of thousands of dollars for me over time.
What's one thing you'd like to leave our listeners, our watchers, our viewers? What would you like to leave them as one piece of advice that they should be thinking about from a revenue perspective?
Man, I know that it's those dumb cliches that sound good that are always annoying, but I'm going to say it anyway. Your network or your net worth is your network, or your net worth is your network is your net worth. See, I can't even do it right, folks, but it's true both ways. How's that? It really does pay to dig the well before you get thirsty. There's another crappy cliche for you. But what I would do is, if people are like, oh, how do I get started doing this? Either do the Connect 4 thing where you scroll down to the bottom of your text messages, or assume your business implodes tomorrow, God forbid. Make a list of the 10 or 15 people that you would reach out to for advice. It could be like your old boss, somebody you used to work for, another entrepreneur, a neighbor that you think is really smart. Doesn't matter. Former colleague. Make a list of those people. And I bet you haven't talked to most of those people in years, or at the very least several months. Reach out to those people now while you don't actually need anything. Because if you reach out tomorrow and your business does implode, they're going to be like, oh, crap, he wants a job. If you reach out tomorrow and you don't need anything, but you want to re-engage, they're still going to be suspicious. They're still going to think you're going to try and sell them, Scientology or some, MLM, multi-level marketing pyramid scheme protein shakes. But once they get past that suspicion because you don't actually want anything, you're going to have re-engaged that weak and dormant tie. And that's going to be you're going to realize that a lot of people are happy to hear from you. It feels good to reconnect with people, and that it often translates into opportunities that weren't going to otherwise come your way because now you're top of mind. And it gives you a chance to help them with what they want, which is always good. That's what I would do if you're looking for an action step.
Brilliant. That is absolutely amazing. Jordan, you have been an incredible guest. We've loved having you on. I'm definitely going to put a link to the 6 Minute Networking.
Yeah, please do.
I personally view it a little bit like Spinal Tap. Yours goes to 6, doesn't need to go to 5, goes one step more. We'll put it in the show notes. Where else can we find you?
Yeah, 6minutenetworking.com is the course, and the Jordan Harbinger Show is the podcast, HARBINGER. If you like podcasts where I talk a little bit less than I do today, then with interesting people, then I hope you'll love the show. I'd love to see some of your show fans coming on over. So thanks for the opportunity, man. I really appreciate it.
Brilliant. Thanks again, Jordan. We'll speak to you soon.
Thank you.